The case of Edward Jon Zakrzewski II. A study in domestic homicide. The condemned and his crime. Edward Jon Zakrzewski II, a former technical sergeant in the United States Air Force, stands as a subject of profound study within the annals of criminal justice. His name is inextricably linked to a horrific act of domestic violence that transpired decades ago. Zakrzewski was convicted of the brutal murders of his wife, Sylvia, and their two young children, Edward Jr., also known as Kim and A. These unspeakable acts occurred on June 13 within the quiet community of Mary Esther, Florida. The passage of time has brought this case to a critical juncture. Edward Jon Zakrzewski II is currently scheduled for execution on July 31, 2025. This impending date underscores the enduring gravity of his crimes and the protracted nature of capital punishment cases. The case of Edward Jon Zakrzewski II serves as a stark and somber illustration of domestic homicide. It provides a detailed examination of the devastating impact of violence within a family unit and the subsequent legal processes. This analysis aims to present the facts objectively, contributing to a historical record of a profound tragedy. Please like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Background and motive. The family unit at the center of this tragedy began in South Korea. Edward Zakrzewski met his wife, Sylvia, in 1982. Their union produced two children, Edward Jr., affectionately known as Kim, who was 7 years old, and Anne, who was 5. In 1992, the family relocated to Florida following Zakrzewski's transfer to Eglin Air Force Base. For a time, their lives appeared to follow a conventional military family path. However, underlying tensions began to surface. The Zakrzewski family had recently relocated to Florida from South Korea, a significant transition that preceded the tragic events. Beneath the surface of their new life, profound marital discord and escalating tensions were present. The relationship between Edward and Sylvia Zakrzewski had deteriorated significantly. This internal strife created an environment of increasing instability within the household. Sylvia Zakrzewski had initiated legal proceedings, filing for divorce from her husband. Her intention was to return to South Korea, taking their two young children with her. This decision represented a definitive step towards ending the marriage and relocating her family. Sylvia's formal divorce filing, submitted on June 9, 1994, proved to be a critical and immediate trigger for the subsequent violence. The impending divorce became a direct point of contention. On June 9, 1994, Edward Jr. informed his father that Sylvia had officially filed for divorce. This revelation appears to have been a critical trigger, pushing Zakrzewski towards a dark path. Indicators of premeditation emerged in the days leading up to the murders. A neighbor testified that Zakrzewski had previously threatened to kill his family if Sylvia ever left him. This chilling statement foreshadowed the violence to come. The night before the murders, Zakrzewski engaged in a significant drinking binge. He also systematically emptied his bank accounts, withdrawing over $5,400. This financial maneuver suggests a deliberate preparation for flight or a complete severance from his former life. On the very day of the murders, Zakrzewski purchased a machete. This acquisition, combined with his prior threats and financial actions, paints a disturbing picture of calculated intent. The evidence points to a mind already set on a destructive course. His excessive consumption of alcohol could be interpreted as a deliberate act to steel himself or to diminish inhibitions before committing violence. Further evidence of premeditation surfaced through his financial activities. Perhaps most chillingly, on the very day of the murders, Edward Zakrzewski purchased a machete. His acquisition of a specific, lethal weapon strongly indicated a deliberate intent to inflict severe harm. The murders and immediate aftermath. On June 13, 1994, Edward Zakrzewski failed to report for duty at Hurlburt Field, raising immediate concerns among his colleagues. His absence was unusual and prompted an investigation into his whereabouts. Deputies dispatched to the family residence made a horrifying discovery. The bodies of Sylvia Zakrzewski and her two children were found in the bathtub. The scene was one of extreme violence and profound tragedy. Sylvia Zakrzewski had been subjected to multiple forms of assault. She was strangled and then attacked with both a machete and a crowbar, indicating a prolonged and brutal assault. The two children, Edward Jr. and Anne, suffered equally horrific fates. They were hacked to death with the machete, a weapon specifically acquired by The injuries inflicted upon Edward Jr. were particularly severe, resulting in near decapitation. This detail underscores the extreme force and intent behind the attack. All three victims sustained extensive and grievous injuries. They were stabbed, slashed, and beaten, reflecting the ferocity of the assault. The medical examination revealed the full extent of the violence. Crucially, The children exhibited defensive wounds, indicating a desperate struggle for survival against their attacker. These injuries provided direct evidence of their attempts to ward off the assault. Evidence directly implicating Zakrzewski was found at the scene. Blood, later confirmed to be that of his victims, was present on his clothing, specifically his shirt and socks. The murder weapons were also recovered at the scene, providing tangible links to the perpetrator. The machete, the crowbar, and a rope were all found, consistent with the injuries sustained by the victims. Following the murders, Zakrzewski fled the scene. He absconded in the family car, a blue 1992 Geo Prism, initiating a multi-state manhunt, capture, and legal proceedings. Edward Zakrzewski's flight from justice led him across the country. He eventually fled to Molokai Island, Hawaii, in an attempt to evade capture. While in Hawaii, he adopted an assumed identity, living under the name Michael Green. This deliberate act was an attempt to disappear and avoid detection. His evasion was Zakrzewski was recognized after an episode of the television program Unsolved Mysteries featured his case. This public exposure proved instrumental in his apprehension. Upon realizing he had been identified, Zakrzewski turned himself in to local police in Hawaii. His period as a fugitive concluded just months after the murders. The long arm of the law had reached him. He was returned to Florida on October 25, 1994, to face the charges against him. Once back in the jurisdiction, Zakrzewski confessed to the murders. His confession provided a direct admission of guilt regarding the heinous crimes. In March 1996, he pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder. This plea acknowledged his culpability for the premeditated killings. During his confession, Zakrzewski claimed that he wanted his family to die quickly and painlessly. However, this assertion was directly contradicted by the medical examiner's testimony. The forensic evidence detailed the extensive and brutal injuries, indicating prolonged suffering. The defense team attempted to mitigate Zakrzewski's culpability during the legal proceedings. They cited various factors, including alleged emotional distress, claims of infidelity on Sylvia's part, his gambling problems, and a history of abuse. These arguments aimed to provide context for his actions, though they did not negate the facts of the murders. The jury, after hearing the evidence, rendered a complex recommendation for sentencing. They recommended the death penalty for the murders of Sylvia and Edward Jr., but life imprisonment for the murder of Anne. This split recommendation reflected the jury's deliberation on each individual victim. Sentencing and appeals, despite the jury's mixed recommendation, the presiding judge ultimately overruled their decision. The judge sentenced Edward Zakrzewski to death for all 3 murders. This judicial override underscored the court's assessment of the severity of the crimes. The judge cited several aggravating factors that justified the imposition of the death penalty for each count. These factors included the extreme brutality of the murders, the clear evidence of premeditation, and the fact that there were multiple victims. These elements collectively painted a picture of exceptional depravity. Following his conviction and sentencing, Zakrzewski initiated a series of appeals. These legal challenges sought to overturn his conviction or commute his death sentence. However, his appeals proved unsuccessful at various levels of the judicial system. Both the Florida Supreme Court and the United States Supreme Court reviewed his case. Each court upheld his conviction and the death sentence. This consistent affirmation by higher courts indicated that no reversible errors were found in the original proceedings. The legal process, spanning decades, has now reached its final stages. The judicial system has exhausted its avenues for review, leaving the sentence intact. Execution details and significance. A death warrant for Edward Jon Zakrzewski II has been signed by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. This official act sets the final stage for the execution. The execution date has been set for July 31, 2025. The method of execution will be lethal injection, consistent with Florida's current protocol. If carried out, this execution would potentially mark the 9th in Florida during the year 2025. This statistic highlights the state's active use of capital punishment. Furthermore, this case highlights the enduring complexities inherent in capital punishment. It raises questions about justice, retribution, and the finality of state-sanctioned death. The Zakrzewski case remains a significant entry in the historical record of criminal justice. It offers a somber case study for true crime analysis, victim advocacy, and the ongoing discourse surrounding capital punishment.